Alright, we're going to go ahead and start then. So, this is my first class. Thank you all for coming. If anyone, I'm assuming everyone can hear me. And I will be running with more or less closed comms. If you have questions, post it in class.E-UNI, and I will get to it. If you want something, if I'm talking about something and you want it covered more in depth, let me know, and I'll do my best for it. If anyone else has anything that they want to chime in with in addition to something I say, please feel free to. More information is always better. I did write a syllabus. There's the link for you guys if you want to follow it. It's not very detailed right now. It's more of just a general overview of what the class is. I will be adding to it after the class today, once I know what I end up talking about for sure. So, essentially what I will be covering here, I do expect that everyone attending has a basic idea of wormholes and W-space, and at least a little bit about how it works. I'll be giving a quick overview of it. And if you do want a more detailed overview, there is the Wormholes 100 page. Let me get that link here. You beat me to it. Alright, yep. So if you want more in-depth background of wormholes, read that. It's fairly long, but it's very good information. Okay, so after the quick overview, I will be then covering the experience that I have in living in wormhole space, how to do it, the logistics of it, how to make money off it, and then at the end, I'll just leave it open for any and all questions and answers. So, my personal experience with this, just to give you guys, just so you know what to expect, I lived in a C2 wormhole for about 3 or 4 months, back before I joined E-UNI. The only reason I moved out, I didn't have time to maintain the wormhole like I wanted to. That and I came to college, so. I do also have a fair amount of experience running C5s in fleets with the Uni specifically. So I'll be covering that. I don't have any experience with C6s, unfortunately. I wish I did. So I will cover everything that I know for living in a wormhole that I can tell you, and then I will also cover running sites and wormhole rating with the higher class wormholes, such as what the Uni does at war occasionally, for those of you that have been there, either with me or with others. Alright, so we'll start with the very basics. I'm going to assume, again, that you all at least know more or less about wormholes, but I'll give it a quick overview anyways. A wormhole, and quick differences here. When I refer to a wormhole, I am talking about the actual physical wormhole, like the jump gate wormhole. I will call wormhole systems W-space. I might call them wormholes while I'm talking. I mean W-space if I'm talking about a system. I apologize if I confuse anybody with that. So, the difference between wormhole space and K-space, known space, or empire space, I will call that K-space for the lecture. The main difference is that for one, there's no local. There is a local, but it doesn't have anybody in it. When you jump into a system, you have no idea if anyone is there. So, that's one of the biggest differences. It's also null-sec security. There's no security, no concord, no sec losses. And wormholes can open anywhere. And the actual wormhole itself has various rules that they follow. There's mass limits and timers on them. So, that's more or less, I'll cover other stuff more in depth as we go through. So I will move into living in a wormhole and what that entails. So, living in a wormhole is different, to put it that way. It's you can't just go dock up at a station and be safe. You can't just go get missions from an agent and just go sell stuff on the market. There is no market in wormhole space. There is no stations in wormhole space. It is just you and what you bring. So, the first thing that you really need to do if you're living in a wormhole for an extended period of time is you need to set up a player-owned station. So I won't cover that in detail because it's not part of the lecture. I will assume that you more or less know how to do it. But essentially, you want to set up a POS at a moon, and in order of importance, you want to install the tower and get that up and running, put the fuel in. Then you want to move on to setting up defenses. So, in terms of industry at the POS, I recommend little, simply because, especially if you're living in a higher class wormhole. If you're living in a lower class wormhole with a large POS, you'll be okay. If you're living in a higher class wormhole, you need to have defenses. And in a higher class wormhole, enemy fleets can bring in fleets and fleets of battleships to take out your POS. So you need to have it well defended. I personally never had my POS attacked, but I also live in a C2 wormhole and had probably excessive defense on it. Alright, somebody just called me, sorry about that. The other interesting thing with the POS is there is no ice in wormhole space. You can use planetary interaction to make fuel. Sorry, Scruto, are you in Mumble? If you are, no, there's no practical. Next time, just ask in class.E-UNI. That way I don't have to deal with being distracted. Okay, I apologize. So, there is no ice in wormhole space. You can use planetary interaction to make all the other fuel you need. But you have to bring in ice fuel from K-space. So that means you have to find an exit and haul in fuel every few days or weeks, depending. So, other supplies, it's whatever you need to bring in. You really need a corporate hangar array at the very least. Though I've also found that giant security containers can make good little hidden caches in various places. We used that running a C5 one time to keep our loot safe. And I've used them within a POS itself to allow out-of-court members. The other important thing to note is do not ever log off at your POS. It sounds like a good idea, and personally I did it while I was living in my wormhole. But the problem with that is if you were ever attacked, for instance, the wormhole raid that we did to destroy Duckeye's POS, we set up what was called, I guess I can't say it anymore, but it was essentially a cage of warp disruption bubbles. So if he had logged off at the POS and warped in, he would have gotten stuck outside the bubbles, outside of his POS, and we would have killed him. And that is the main reason why you do not log off at your POS. If you come back and have it attacked without your knowledge, you come back, you die, you're screwed. So always log off at a safe spot, and if it's within D-scan range, then you can log in and immediately hit D-scan and see what is going on. Alright, I'll cover defense a little bit more, kind of what you want to do with it here. So there's something which referred to as a Death Star POS, and what that is it's a large POS with an absolute excessive amount of guns. The idea is that anything that comes in will just be totally destroyed very quickly, and it's supposed to be very hard to destroy. But, I mean, if you've seen the E-UNI POS, we have a large POS with, I don't know, like 50 jams. Like, that's just absolutely ridiculous. So, the main point of having, what you want to do with defense in a wormhole POS is you just want to make it annoying as hell to attack. If your enemy's going to bring in 50 battleships, you want to be able to counter the battleships, jam half of them, nuke them, and destroy them. Just make it a pain in the ass to attack your POS. That's the main defense. The problem here is that if you are living in a higher class wormhole, they can bring in capital ships to attack you and whatnot. If that happens, cut your losses if you need to. But the main idea of defense is just make it plain out too annoying to attack. This is especially effective in smaller class wormholes, C1 to 3s, where they can't bring in a large fleet. And then all you have to do is just deal with, stealth bombers or cruisers and maybe a couple battleships. I have personally seen a small POS taken down by 10 stealth bombers. I can't imagine how long it took. Good question, Bob. I will cover that actually here in a minute. It has to deal with mass limits of the entrance wormholes, and I'll talk about that in detail here in a minute. So it is possible to destroy POSes in lower class wormholes. It's tougher and not worth your time, but make it too annoying to be worth it. I also have transporting loot up on there. I'll cover it real quick. The loot that you get from wormholes is mostly salvage, and you can run sites for a week and be able to fit most of your loot within like a cruiser cargo bay. So there's no reason to have to take it out in an industrial. So take it out, defend it. We'll take battleship out or battlecruiser, or put it in like a cloaky frigate, and you should be okay. Alright, so here's something that may or may not be very confusing. We'll see. How to get in and out of wormholes. This is where I'll be talking about the mass limits and spawning mechanics, and it gets a little confusing sometimes. So there are something like 25 or 30 different types of wormholes that can open. Let me link a site for you real quick so you can look at them. That is a list of all the types of wormholes that are out there. Those are not the wormhole systems, those are the actual wormholes. So you see like an A239 opens from inside a wormhole into a low-sec system. So from the name you can tell where the wormhole leads to and its mass limits. So let's take a look at the A239 here. Now, I like this website. It has a fair amount of information on it. The most useful things to note on here, there's the max stable time. So it lasts for about a day, from downtime to downtime, from wherever it spawns to wherever it spawns the next day. The max stable mass is 2 million kilograms or 2 billion kilograms or 2 million metric tons, which is what is listed on fittings. The mass regeneration means that it just doesn't regain mass over time. It stays what it was at. And then lastly, max jump mass. That means that's the limit on the largest ship you can bring in. So what these mean, the max stable max, I'm never gonna get that right, max stable mass. Say that 5 times fast. Okay. What that means is that is the total amount of mass that the wormhole will consume or can have it pass through until it collapses. That's important to note when you need to collapse a wormhole. And the max jump mass is the maximum amount you can jump per jump. So, for instance, a battleship is about 110 metric tons, so that means you could jump 30 battleships through there, you could jump 1 battleship through, or you can fit up to an Orca, I think, but it cannot take capital ships, if I recall. Yeah, I don't know the mass of the Orca off the top of my head, but I believe it's the largest ship you can put through there. So the max stable mass. Okay, so now we'll cover collapsing the wormholes. This deals with the max mass. What that means is you need to jump through a certain amount of mass and the wormhole will collapse. So in this case, it's 2 billion kilograms or 2 million metric tons. What that means is that's 20 battleships worth, basically. Assuming about 100,000 metric tons per battleship, you need to make 20 jumps through that wormhole to collapse it. Cortana, you're keying up. Cortana, you're keying up. If you're talking, I can't hear you. Ah, okay. Could you just hit mute button? Just hit the mute button so you can, so it'll turn off your talking. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Okay, so as I said, you need to jump for this particular wormhole 20 battleships through it to collapse it, or 10 battleships back and forth, or one making 20 trips, which would be a pain. Now, there is a timer on it. When you first jump through a wormhole, there's about a 30-second timer before you can jump back. And once you jump through the same wormhole twice, there's a 4-minute timer. So that's something to keep note of when you're trying to collapse a wormhole solo. When it's in a fleet, it's a lot easier. So, there are 2 reasons for collapsing a wormhole. One of them is because there's hostiles on the other side, and the other is that it opens into a bad location or you want a better exit. So when you collapse it, within 15 minutes or so, we're a little iffy on the timer, there will be the new static wormhole that will respawn. So, once it's collapsed, it will respawn to a new one. Now, there are also 2 types of wormholes within W-space, within a certain W-space system, and it's different for every one. So, for instance, there's statics and dynamics. So when we refer to a wormhole static, it means that's a wormhole that will always be open. In the case of the one I lived in, there was a static lowsec and a static C2 exit. That basically just means that no matter what, there will always be one wormhole leading to lowsec and one wormhole leading to another C2 wormhole. Now, a dynamic wormhole is actually how I first entered mine, and that was a high-sec wormhole that spawned. And a dynamic means that it's one that will, maybe it's a random. Or there's also the theory that they move around through wormhole constellations. It's like a static dynamic for the constellation. I don't know the details of that. I just know that on occasion there will be a 3rd random wormhole that will open. Or I actually had 4 at one point for some reason. Saints. Not quite. Trying to think of a good way to describe it. Alright, let me address the questions here. So, a static wormhole only applies to within the wormhole system that you're in. So, say you're in wormhole system J1000000. So, that's your wormhole. Let's say your wormhole has 2 statics, one to another C2, and one to lowsec, okay? Like mine. That means that there will always be 2 wormholes. There will be a minimum of 2 wormholes in your system. And one of them leads to lowsec, and one of them leads to another C2. They're only static within your wormhole. That lowsec exit will open to a different lowsec system every day. And every time it respawns, it will be a different lowsec system it leads out to. The C2 static means that it will lead to a different C2 every time it respawns. Does that make sense? Is that clear? Okay, good. Vimy, I'm not rich. Maxim, if you have a static A239, it always will say an A239. It's not just a static to lowsec, it's a static of that type of wormhole, and that type of wormhole always leads to lowsec in addition to the same mass limits and everything. So, yeah, it does always have the same name. Nicola, no, it never leads to the same system twice. For instance, when I opened mine, I entered in it. I had one time that it opened like 5 jumps from a Mar. I had one time where it opened 40 jumps deep into lowsec. I don't even remember where that was. I had another time where it opened up like right next to a Drat. It was always in a different location. I got to explore all sorts of places when I went out. It is possible for it to respawn in the same system. Unfortunately, the odds are so low as to be basically it won't. I mean, over time eventually, but just not likely. Okay, so last section under wormhole mechanics here, I'm going to talk about enemy fleets and kind of what I call tactical choking. Yeah, Crickshell, that's probably about right, but, you know. So, enemies can, in a smaller wormhole, such as a C1 through 3, having an enemy bring in a large fleet is unlikely, so it's not much of a worry. In larger wormholes, such as C4, C5, and C6s, it is a problem. And there's a couple ways to deal with them. If you're living solo, you don't want to do that in a high-class wormhole. If you have like a whole corp, you can either have a 23/7 Pickets, or you put up warp bubbles at the wormholes. But there's also a way to do it that's called tactical choking. I don't know if that's actually a word or not, but that's what I call it. And what that is if you look back on the Othello site, you'll see that under mass, or under the general messages, there's a mass, and there's 3 different messages. The first one means that it has more than half of its mass limit left. The second one means that it has a third to a tenth of its mass. And the last one means it has 1/10 of its mass left. So in this case, 200,000 tons, which is 2 battleships tops. So what you can do with the wormhole is you can collapse it manually down to half, and then keep track of how much you've jumped through all the way down, and then you leave it just above 1/10. So you leave it at maybe 250 million kilograms left. Now, the enemy doesn't know that. All they see is that it has between 1/10 and 1/2 of its mass left. They don't know how much is there. If they jump through an Orca at that point, the wormhole collapses. If they jump through 3 battleships, the wormhole collapses. And that's a way to limit what your enemy can bring in. If you have it collapsed down almost all the way, they can't bring in a large fleet. And if they try to, it's going to collapse on them. So hopefully that either scares them off or provides you with something you can deal with easily. Capitals, I'll cover them briefly. If you live in a low-class wormhole, you cannot bring a capital in. I believe the only capital ships that you can bring in are carriers and dreadnoughts, as well as orcas and rorquals and freighters. But you cannot bring in super capital ships. Now, you can build them in a wormhole. There are multiple C2s that have carriers in them, but they cannot leave the wormhole then. So it's a bit of a trade-off. In general, if you're living in anything but a C5 or C6, I wouldn't worry about capitals. If you're in a C6, then you might need to worry about them bringing in a capital. Exion, I'm not entirely sure. I've heard that it is possible. I think with server lag and client lag that there would be just enough that you couldn't. But I think I've heard that there is a small window of time after you collapse it that the wormhole remains open and you can jump another couple ships through. I don't know for sure. I've never done it, and I've never seen it done. I suppose it's possible. Oh, you tried it earlier too? Okay. That's good to know. So worst case, they get one more ship through, it looks like. So, but I mean, you couldn't jump in 100 battleships through that wormhole that I just showed you. That would never work. That would collapse too fast. But yeah, that was a good question, and that isn't something I'm sure of, to be honest. Okay, so now we'll go over making money in a wormhole. So there are startup costs to the wormhole, such as player-owned stations, which are quite a bit, and then what ships you need. I spent around 500 mil on my medium POS. Of course, I did use the faction tower, but they can be very expensive to start with. I mean, you'd be looking at about 300 to 400 mil minimum to get a large POS in there. And then you have to have fuel and ice fuel. And then you have to bring in your ships. And it can be a very high start cost, especially for a newer player. For a corporation or an older player, it's not as much of a big deal, especially considering how much you can make. So I'm going to actually cover the sites before I cover fleet operations here. So there's 5 different sites within a wormhole. The first one that pops up on either your ship scanner or not on D-scan, but on your ship scanner, as well as on core probes. They return 100% hit the first time. Those are called encounters. I think there might actually be another name for them, but I don't remember. I call them encounters. And those are combat sites, pure combat sites. There's just rats there. The website that I linked earlier with the wormhole types also has information on the different types of encounters within a wormhole. You can look up a specific system. Yes, Stavro, they're similar to anomalies in K-space. They are a little different, though, and sleepers hit harder. Now, there's also grav sites, gravimetric sites, and those are for mining, ore mining. There are usually, 2 frigate rats there when you first warp to it, so you have to kill those, but they do not respawn. And then once you warp to it, the site lasts, I think, 4 days, unless you mine it out. But to mine a grav site out requires, I think 20 boosted hulks, and it takes them all day. I don't know, but there's a lot of ore in gravimetric sites in wormholes. They're similar to actually they are nullsec grav sites, but they also have Merxicot, if I recall. The next site would be Ladar, and that's gas mining. I don't know many people that gas mine, but it is possible. And gas mining and wormholes is dependent on the class of the wormhole, whereas the gravimetric sites are not. Unfortunately, most of the later sites are generally considered not very profitable. But there's a lot of gas in them. And then, so radar sites. These are hacking sites, so you need a hack module and a hack skill, at least a level 4. And you want, 1 rig for it. And those are the second toughest sites. They're harder than encounters, and they're easier than magnetometrics. And, yes, Quicksilver, the Codebreaker one there. And gas is essential for Tech 3 production. But as I said, I don't know many people that do it. You do need it, and I never gas mined or mined while I was living in my wormhole. I was just doing combats. But yes, there are people that do. So hacking these radar sites, the second toughest, there are a lot of rats there, and they are very hard. They tend to have 2 to 3 waves, and even a C2 would spawn 3 battleships. So, they're tough. And then magnetometrics, I only remember ever getting one of these in my wormhole, and it was a C2. They're analyzing sites, so they require the archaeology module, whatever that module is called, I forget. But those are the absolute hardest. There's a lot of rats in them, but they also make the most money. There's something like 30 cans, and you have to use the analyzing module. That's what it's called. On them, you need the archaeology skill to level 4 or 5 really, and it takes a good hour just to crack the cans. It takes a long time. The good news is though, there is also a chance for a random spawn of a Taukian battleship wreck, I believe it's called. And what that has a chance to drop either subsystem or hull BPCs once you open it. And those are worth quite a bit. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I believe that's what it was. Alright, so now I'll cover fleet operations and how to run the sites. So for my C2, I ran it in a passive shield tanked Hurricane that had probably not nearly enough DPS. But it worked. I could tank them. So it is soloable in C1s and C2s are easily enough soloable in battlecruisers. I believe you can use Tech 3s to solo. I think the Tengu is used to solo C3s. I don't know. I don't fly Tech 3s right now. But that's what I have heard. C4s and up, those require a fleet. Pretty much hands down. You need a fleet of battleships with remote reps and energy transfers. There really just is no other way to do it. I do have a couple fits I will post of. I only have Minotaur fits, but they are remote armor. Sorry. So there's a Typhoon fit that has energy transfers and remote reppers. You pretty much always need to be armor tanked, unless it has bonuses against armor resists and whatnot. Pretty much everybody uses armor tanked battleships. The one I have works alright. It's slow, but it works. And then I also have a Tempest one, I believe. Yes, I do. That's a similar Tempest fleet. Caldari, yeah, about that. Well, I'll post this for the heck of it. Yes, that is an armor tanked Raven. There's really not a lot of easy ways to do Caldari in a wormhole. It's pretty much Galente, Minmatar, and Amar. But I suppose if you... I remember someone saying they were going to bring an armor tanked Rock, but they didn't. Yeah, I don't know what Caldari could do. I mean, there are shield tanked. You can do shield tanked fits. For instance, I could fly a Maelstrom with one ET and one shield repper, but it's just not done very often. Bob, there's nothing wrong with the Raven. The only problem with Caldari is that they all pretty much exclusively shield tank. And most fleets that do wormholes are armor tanked. That's the reason why most people don't use them. Actually, it would not need to be in an all Caldari fleet, but for instance, you could do Minmatar as well. But it is limiting. I don't know. I mean, it is what it is. Mostly the plates, I believe, as far as I know. The 1600 steel plates give a ton of armor, and you can fit 3 of them on a Typhoon and a Dominix, or 2 of them on anything else, really. Or you can fit 3 on an Abaddon, I believe. I think that's one of the main reasons for it. And armor rep is more efficient. Okay, I didn't know that. The other interesting thing is in a C5, if you just buffer tanked, like for instance, if you had a triple plated, say Dominix or Typhoon, you can literally within 30 seconds have your armor gone and be in the hull and dying, even with the damage control. Sleepers are powerful. I mean, we lost 2 battleships in the last C5 that I ran, and they died so fast. We could not get enough armor reps on them. They went down really fast. That's also the reason why for C5s, when we run C5s with the E-UNI, we don't bring battlecruisers. You won't last. You will be alphaed with battlecruisers. In a C4, you might be able to get away with it. In a C5 or C6, it's battleships. You just need to have the buffer, basically, as well as having like 10 other people with reps on you. Yes, they do have a different AI. I'm not 100% sure on how it works, but what I know is that they different actions generate aggro to the sleepers. So shooting at them, hitting them, produces aggro. Remote repping somebody else produces more aggro. So if 2 people are doing equal damage and one of them is remote repping somebody, they're going to shoot the guy that's remote repping instead of the guy that's being remote repped. And then jamming creates the most aggro. It seems to piss them off. They get kind of angry about it. But jamming creates the most aggro, so the Scorpions are almost always primaried. And yes, they will switch targets. In C3s or in C2s and below, I can't confirm this for above, but they will aggro drones. If you deploy drones to attack sleepers, they will stop shooting you and they will pop your drones very fast. I've had it done. It's annoying. Though I also drone tanked a battleship one time. That was fun. But you can't use drones in the C2 or below. They'll just kill them. Though I believe it's also if you have more than 4 people, they don't shoot drones. I haven't had a chance to really test all that, but that's what I believe. So, fleet compositions for C5s, because that appears to be more or less what the uni runs. We usually do something like 10 battleships, at least 2 Scorpions, and then it's usually Abaddons or Apocalypses, Tempests or Typhoons, and Dominix is pretty much what I've seen. I've not seen a Megathron come with us, and I haven't seen Maelstrom come with us, but then again, that's shit tanked. So that's more or less what I've seen the uni use. But you really need, generally what we take is 2 ECM boats. One second. You generally need like 2 ECM boats, and then everybody fits 1 energy transfer and 1 remote rep. And then you set up a cap chain, so you'll have enough cap to counteract the newts, and you have enough armor reps to rep whoever's being primaried. Davral, it's pretty much only the armor tanked battleships. So the Scorpion, hey, that's Caldari. Scorpion. The Scorpion, the Dominix, the Tempest, and the Typhoon, the Abaddon, and the Apocalypse. Those are the only ones I've seen come with the uni. I suppose you could take the, I totally forgot about the Scorpion. Yeah, Caldari take ECM. They bring the ECM for the sleepers because you can jam them, and they don't care what racial jammer you use. And they can be armor tanked. Actually, when you're running the higher class wormholes with enough people, the sleepers will not aggro your drones. Which is why I'm a little confused on exactly how the drone aggro works. But I do know for sure that when you're with a fleet running a higher class wormhole, they do not shoot drones. So the Dommies do fine, and the Typhoon does fine. So, and then I'll mention capital ships and C6s here. Class 6 wormholes are the highest class wormholes. You more or less need a large fleet of battleships, and I've also heard that you need capital support. I can't confirm that, I haven't run them. But the mechanics with capital ships, as soon as you warp a capital ship into a site in a C4 or above, I believe it is, it will immediately spawn 8 more sleeper battleships. Now, for those of you familiar with missions, that might be a tad worrying, but you just kill them real quick and tank them and it's not a problem. That was a loud car. Sorry. To give you a perspective on how much damage the sleepers do, there's a video on YouTube. I don't have the link. Back when Apocrypha first came out and they had the new wormholes and nobody really knew anything about them, there was a guy in an armor-tanked Myrmidon. I believe he goes into a C2. And the Myrmidon's got a decent tank, right? He goes into a C2 and starts shooting the sleepers. He cannot even kill a frigate in the 30 seconds it takes the sleepers to destroy a ship. 30 seconds or so. And the damage output on sleepers is incredible. 1 frigate would be able to kill a battleship, or I shouldn't say that. If you had a buffer-tanked battleship with no reps on itself, a frigate could kill it eventually. And by eventually, I mean like within a half hour, maybe. You go into a C2 with just a buffer-tanked battleship, they're going to kill you in about a minute. As the damage output on sleepers is incredible. And with 8 battleships, let me put it this way. Carriers cannot solo a C5. They die. So 8 battleships being spawned per capital ship that you warp in is a lot of DPS that you have to deal with. So, warping in capital ships, I mean, unless you know what you're doing, just don't do it. Of course, it'd also be a funny trick to do to somebody if you were raiding that wormhole. Alright, so... Okay, so the E-UNI... Oh. Nicola kind of just have, like... They don't use modules in the same sense that we do. Maxim, that is correct. They don't have the same modules that we do. They do have sleeper-specific weapons. They have lasers that will hit you at 150k, and they have missiles that will hit you at the same distance. And they will nuke you from 150k. They will weapon scram you from 150k. Basically, once you warp in, you can be hit and targeted and destroyed. Maxim, that is also correct. You don't have to warp in. You just initiate the warp. So, now we'll do the industrial fleets here. Or I'll talk about the salvagers and those guys. Hexion, I don't believe they are, unfortunately. They're kind of ugly anyways. Why would you want to fly one? So, the E-UNI runs with, when we have salvagers, unfortunately we can't use a Noctis during wartime, but when we use salvagers, we usually use we generally make them tank a shield-tanked battlecruiser. With cargo, actually, you can do armor tanks, I guess, since you don't need a lot of cargo space. But we also have them fit a cloak, and the reason for that is that they hide at a safe spot, cloak up, and wait till we're done running a site. Then they warp into the site and start salvaging the wrecks. We also, when I run C5s, I prefer to have a dedicated salvager and a dedicated hacker and analyzer. The reason for this is that salvaging takes a while. Even with salvaging 5, Tech 2 salvagers, and 3 salvage rigs, salvaging takes a while. The wrecks are hard to salvage. It's what it is. You have to have salvage level 5 or the equivalent in order to salvage sleeper battleship wrecks. So that means you need to have salvage 4 with 1 salvage rig or the actual level 5. Exion, the reason we don't use Noctises is that they are not allowed during wartime. That's the only reason we don't use them. Otherwise, yes, they would be better. Because of their salvage, because of their bonuses. The hacking and archaeology sites, they just take a long time to do. So if you have someone dedicated to it that can work on it while you guys are running another site, by the time you finish running the site, he'll still be cracking the cans. Yeah, that and Noctises are expensive, Exion. So that's just the main reason we don't use them. Is one, it's been wartime, and 2, they're kind of expensive and they're kind of made of glass, but you can tank a battlecruiser and get almost the same level of salvaging out of it. So there's really, it's iffy. It's what you want to do basically. Okay, lastly, scouts and pickets. You need them. Don't run a wormhole without them. What I like usually, if we have people that are just being dedicated pickets, what you do is you put one of them, either in a proto cloak or a cloaky, and have one of them sit at each of the wormhole exits. So I think the one we did one day had 4, so you would have had one person sitting cloaked on the, like 10k off each wormhole, cloaked, just watching it, and what happens is it flashes, similar to a gate. It just kind of, it's more of like a orange glow and then dies down again. But you can see it activating. And then they let the fleet know that there was activation, and it was either friendly because they know who it was, or hostile when they didn't. The other thing that is good is a scout. It's a little bit better. What you can do is, preferably in addition to the pickets, you can put 1 combat scanner probe at each wormhole, and maybe a medium range on it so you can see around it. And you can sit there and he can watch the scan while watching scans and see if anybody else shows up on the combat scans. With scouts, you need to get all the ships that you know of together in one place, ignore all their scans, all their scan sigs, and then as soon as something new pops up, you'll see it, and it's easy to do. Then the purpose of the scout picket is hopefully to notice a hostile fleet before they jump the guys running the missions. Davro, having 2 screens is wonderful. I recommend it. The last time, a couple times ago when we ran a C5 that didn't end well, I guess it's story time. So we were in a C5 and we had just wrapped up finishing running a site, and we had a wormhole open up into a rather hostile nullsec system, and rather active nullsec system. So we started trying to crash it. Unfortunately, we had a hick and a buzzard and a typhoon jump into the wormhole with us. So we proceeded to start jumping around, bouncing between planets and moons, trying to just kind of avoid them. Unfortunately, their buzzard pilot was damn good, scanned us down, and the hick jumped in on us and lit up the bubble before it was me and our Saras could get out. So we took the Pod Express back to Old Drat. Rest of the fleet got out okay. But that was the prime example of needing to have a picket watching it. As soon as it flashed and we saw ships jumping in, I mean, we should have been out of there. Unfortunately, that came at the same time as we were trying to find a good exit. But at that point, we should have just took what we had and jumped into another C5. Is what we should have done. But that's the dangers of enemy fleets right there. It's nullsec space, so you can bring in a hick with a bubble, a heavy interdictor, and jump and drop a bubble, and it's hard to escape from that. It's really hard to escape from that. And having scouts and kits, you need to have all your exits mapped out. You need to know where your exits are. You need to have everyone in fleet with a bookmark with those, and you need to be watching D-scan at all times. If you're not paranoidly scanning D-scan, you're not doing it right. You need to be like, I came back to K-Space after living in my C2. D-scan scared the hell out of me. And then I remembered I was in K-Space and calmed down a little bit. That's the level of paranoia you live at living in a wormhole. It's just constant. You need to watch. You never know when somebody else is there with you. And with cloaky T3s and with cloaking recon ships, I was jumped one time by in a Razu or Lachesis. It was one of the Galente ones that had the bonus to disrupt range. He uncloaked 60k away, locked me, and scrammed me before I even had time to blink. You just don't know who is there, who is watching you. Just always assume that there is somebody there cloaked watching you. Yeah, Remrick, when you start marking gates before you warp off, you are at the point where you should be living in wormholes. and where it's actually a tinfoil hat. Exion is a tinfoil hat. Just so you know. I'm not wearing one right now, I swear. So, as I said, you get paranoid living there, because you're always watching your back, you don't know what's going on. Never, that makes no sense. Alright, I'm sorry. Okay. So, that's about all I have on my syllabus. If any of you want, so I guess I'll open it up to questions and answers. It turns out to be a little shorter than I thought. That's okay. So feel free to ask any and all questions. If you want clarification on something, I can cover that. So go ahead and ask what you need. Kareen, you know what? I'll mention this real quick. Higher class wormholes tend to only have exits to lower class wormholes. So a C6, I don't know that they ever open up into K-space at all. Even if it's deep nullsec, I don't think C6s ever open up into K-space. C5s do occasionally. It's usually low sec, or it's usually actually null sec that C5s open to. Occasionally low sec. But the higher the class wormhole, the harder they are to find. And there's actually wormholes that live, I think the maximum is 4 levels deep, or I think it's 3 levels deep. So you can jump into one wormhole, to jump into another wormhole, to jump into another C5 wormhole, or C6 wormhole. And that wormhole never has an exit to K-space. It will only have an exit to a lower class wormhole. And that wormhole will have another exit to another lower class wormhole, which then has an exit to K-space. It can make it, well, I mean, it's hard to find you, should you ever be living in that. But getting out's a bitch. That's just hard. You've seen a C6 link to 0.5 sec. Interesting. Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, that would be what's called a dynamic wormhole. And those are very rare. But, yeah. Davro, what I meant by industrial fleets was the salvager, the hacker, and the analyzer. I should have phrased it better. Oh God. Okay. Oh, alright. I'm gonna tell the story of how I lost the Orca. Was it Remrick's Orca? I forget whose it was. Yeah, it was Remrick's Orca. Basically, we found it was the next day, and we scanned down the exit C5, the exit wormhole to a deep nullsec. And we were going to collapse it because we wanted a better exit, because it was it like 25 jumps deep into sovereign nullsec, I believe. So we warped 4 battleships and an Orca, 17 jumps in sovereign nullsec. So we jumped in 4 battleships and an Orca to the wormhole, and was going to collapse it. So I told the Orca to go ahead and jump through the wormhole, and then I pulled out my calculator, started doing some calculations to figure out what the mass was at. So the Orca jumps through the wormhole, and it collapses. And so now Remrick's Alt's Orca is stranded 17 jumps deep into sovereign nullsec. It's 17 jumps just to low sec. It was bad. For some reason, he had a cloaking device and a scan probe launcher on his Orca, which was good thinking, I suppose. But yeah, that was a fun learning experience right there. Always click on a hole, show info, and it will tell you at what mass level it's at. Nicola, he did get out. Yes, he got out. He got the Orca out safely. He dropped probes, cloaked up the Orca, scanned down another C5, and jumped into that one. And then I believe he chilled there for a little while until Maze 9 actually came and scattered a way out for him. And oh my God, Arceris, there you go, man. It was the funny thing though. The really, really funny thing about losing that Orca in the sovereign nullsec is a couple hours later we got jumped and had half our fleet destroyed by the guys from the other nullsec system. So I say I saved the Orca in kind of a roundabout, tough way, but that's the really funny thing. Getting dropped down. Oh yeah, I gotta post the AR. The AR is very much worth reading. But I mean, getting dropped in the sovereign nullsec. I mean, God, that was bad, man. If anyone has that AR link off the top of their head, I'll grab it real quick. Yep, there you go. That AR is worth a read if you haven't. It's really funny. Kind of tells you some of my mistakes, some of our mistakes, Remrick's brilliance of fitting a cloak fitting a cloak on his Orca. I can't believe he did that, but man, it saved him. So there are 2 benefits to having an Orca and a wormhole. Specifically for us, we could the Orca has a ship maintenance array where you could fit ships in a fleet that are not in corp. And then the other advantage is that it has more mass than a battleship, so it's very easy to collapse wormholes with it. So that's the benefit to having an Orca and a wormhole. And it works quite well for collapsing wormholes as long as you remember that it's more than the Orca's mass. Don't do what I did. So hopefully that's a good explanation. Does anyone else have any other questions? Derek, wormholes are all nullsec. I believe their true sec is negative 0.99. I think they're all the same, because it's like literally like just the deepest you can go, I guess. So yes, planetary interaction is the same in a C1 as it is in a C6. It just varies depending on the planets in the wormhole and your skill levels. Oh, TrueSec shows now. Okay, that's good then. So they're -1, I guess then. All right. So they're the deepest you can go then. And for the record, I think when I was running my POS, it took two characters at mid level for planetary interaction to keep the POS field. So one very highly skilled player could very well, if you had a corp, two highly skilled players could easily cover the POS field needed for a medium faction POS is what I had. So you could very easily do that. You might need, two of them could probably cover a large POS. Yes, they do take less fuel. Yeah. So, I mean, two or three highly skilled players could easily fill a large POS, no problem. Vimy, assuming you don't use a faction POS, you would need about 500 to 1 billion. It depends exactly what you want to put up. I would err on the slightly higher side, so I would guess 800 roughly. But that's not a perfect guess. As I said, though, the starting cost is rather high. So you need the POS, you need ships, you need players. Alright, Remrick has a good point. You pretty much need a T2 tank. There's no way around it. Get a T2 tank. If you don't bother coming. You seriously need a T2 tank. Like, I cannot stress that enough. Sleepers do a shit ton of damage. You need a T2 tank. Okay, so what sites are best to start with? What ship, what class? Depends on your skills. I lived solo in a C2, so I could run all the classes solo. If you're running a C5, ships, you need an armor tank battleship. Like, that's it. What sites are best? As I said, the mag site is both the most valuable and the hardest, and then radar sites, then encounters. So you would do them more or less in that order. Unless you can't run the radar or mag site, in which case just do encounters. Either way, you make a lot of money. Okay, investment horizon. Yeah, it takes up to $1 billion to start up. Let me put this into perspective for you. The first C5 I did with the E-UNI, we took out, I think it was 10 guys in battleships. We ran 3 sites. We made about 1.25 billion ISK. Sorry, it was one. We made 1,330 million because we each got a payout of 130 million. So that was 3 sites in about 4 hours, and we made almost 1.5 billion ISK. Supernova, I use a Typhoon. The boxy thing fit that I linked is what I fit now. Let's see. Yep. Yeah, Remark. Typhoon is a good ship. The other alternative is Dominic's, depending if you're high on drone skills. Just depends on what you want to do. I mean, you can fly a Scorpion and fill it with drones and missile launchers, or whatever you want to do. Typhoon's good because you can use missile launchers on it as well, so if you're coming from Caldari, you already have all those skills trained. I personally fit Ares on mine because I have no missile skills. But it is what it is. Okay, I'll address Alaris' question first, because that'll be faster. Alaris, when we call for a wormhole fleet, it'll be an alliance. It'll basically just be like armor tanked or battleships, X up or whatever, and we'll be calling, I mean, you'll know, nobody else calls for a fleet of armor tanked or battleships. That means it's a wormhole. Faye, you don't. Esseron, Exeron, I can't pronounce people's names, I'm sorry. How do I live in a C2? I had more than one ship. What I did was, I wasn't in uni at the time, I was in my corp. So I set up a medium POS, I had a ship maintenance array, and I had a corp hangar in addition to defenses. That was the only defensive things I had, were those two. I had, how many ships did I have with me? I had, I think, 5. I had a Cheetah, which I actually just got into halfway into my wormhole time, and they were wonderful, by the way. So I had my Cheetah, my scan ship, and then I had, I actually brought my stealth bomber, mostly just for the hell of it, I never really flew it. And then I brought my Hurricane. I think I had 2 Hurricanes and 2 Hurricanes and like 3 sets of fittings, I think. And then I also had my Mammoth. I brought 2 Mammoths. I brought my expendable Mammoth and my pimped Mammoth. The pimped Mammoth was for bringing in a full cargo. The expendable Mammoth was for, oh god, I'm 10 jumps deep into low sec and need to get fuel right now. So that was, I actually have an interesting story about running a gate camp in a Mammoth one time. That was exciting. Davriel, thank you for that kind warning. As I said, if you're running a C5, you need to have, we usually try to get minimum of 10 battleships. We really need more like 12 to 15 to make it go faster and have the tank. It just all depends. Any other questions? Yeah, Rimrick, I don't know if I'd say C3s, but yeah, you could easily do C2s and C1s in a battle cruiser, no problem. I do know someone that fit, I think I have a Drake wormhole fit somewhere, but I don't know. Yeah, and salvaging and hacking, well, salvaging is probably the best way to get in when you don't have the skills to fly an armor tank battleship. We always need salvagers. It takes forever. Having 2 might be better. So it is, whatever. Exion, Varian, no one ever attacked my POS, so I guess I got lucky. But I was also living in a C2, and I had a medium level POS, so there was really no ability for anyone to take it out. They would have had to build something in the wormhole or very slowly bring in a fleet of battleships. So that would have taken a while. Supernova, you salvage with just are you referring to ship type or like items? Because you just use a regular salvager. You can use a salvager and a tractor beam. Okay. I personally did mine in my battlecruiser while I was running them. So that was it made it go a little faster. I had a tractor beam fitted and a salvager, so I could salvage while I was running the mission, while I was running the encounter. Noctises are used, they're quite common in wormholes. They are very much made of glass. You need to be careful. That's the case of you're salvaging the site while the rest of your crew is there, and keeping you safe. And then as soon as someone else comes, you run off. Arceris, you're right, it's Nocti. I'm sorry. You can also use battlecruisers or destroyers. The problem with destroyers is they're small. I don't know. You can't tank a destroyer like you can tank a battlecruiser. Is the main reason why E-UNI doesn't use those. Talus. Let me read your question. Yes, it is. That's actually a very common tactic. Oh God, what's the name of it? I forget what it's called, but what happens is, say you have you find a new wormhole and there's someone inside of it that you either don't like or just want to kill. You can within 45 minutes have a large POS online and running with defenses, shields up, and a capital ship sitting in it easily within 45 minutes. And as soon as that happens, in a C1 to C3, you can't have the capital ship. But yeah, very easily, within under an hour, you can have a large tower set up, force field up, defenses on, and a fleet of battleships sitting in it. And if that happens, you're in trouble. You can have as many POSes as there are moons in a wormhole, and so, it's the same thing. Yes, you could bring in a capital jump transport, but that's not what we're talking about here. You actually couldn't fit it through the gate anyways, I believe. I don't know the mass on jump transports. Another thing to take note of is you cannot light sinos in nullsec. You cannot light sinos in a wormhole system. They don't work. You can't bring in one. There you are, Cyrus. Oh, I was going to mention something else. Oh, yeah, there was actually something I didn't talk about regarding wormhole and mass limitations. There's an interesting way to look at it. If you're bringing in a lot of fuel, like let's say you need to make like 5 trips, basically of fuel in a mammoth, but you have an orca, and say you could carry all that fuel in like 3 trips of an orca, right? So it would take less time for you. Now, if you wanted to make sure that the wormhole stayed as large as possible, would you use the orca or would you use the mammoth? What you do is you take a look at the mass of both ships compared to the cargo and find out basically how many trips you need for each and which one would affect the wormhole more. As it turns out, the mammoth is actually a better ship to use than the orca for something like that. It reduces the wormhole mass less and brings in the same amount. It just takes maybe a little bit longer. Rathenex, generally what I did personally was, after I salvaged, I went back to the POS and I dropped off all my loot into the corp hangar. Depending on how you're running the wormhole, what the uni has done in the past is generally our salvager has a cloak. So the salvager finishes salvaging, warps to a safe spot, cloaks, and we don't need to worry about him. But yes, you could pass it on to a battleship if you'd like, but there is always the chance that it would get destroyed, whereas the guy that's cloaked is almost impossible to find. So it might, in all regards, be safer in the cloaked ship. Supernova wormholes die, yes. There's a timer limit on them. They last a maximum of, I think, 1.5 days. I think it might be 2 days is the maximum. I don't remember. And then they also they despawn once you run past the mass limit. Then the wormhole will despawn and a new one will respawn somewhere else. Another thing to keep note of, there is always an exit out of wormhole space. If you're in a wormhole, there's always an exit. It's just whether or not you can find it. But there will always be an exit to K-space. Not necessarily from that wormhole, but you will be able to get back to K-space eventually. You're not trapped. Yeah, Supernova, just the entrance, sorry. Just the entrance. How often do sites respawn? That is actually a very good question. The answer is yes, I guess. There's no real predefined limits. It depends on how often you run the sites, how quickly you use them up, and how often you're running them. So, for instance, say you have a corp of 50 people living in a wormhole, and every day, and when you first move in, say there's 20 sites up, there's a lot of sites. You go through and you run through all 20 of those original sites within a week, and the new ones that crop up, you also run more or less in a week. Eventually what happens is the wormhole has a curve, and think of it as like negative x squared or something. It's a curve that starts up high and has a lot of sites spawning constantly, and then it gradually drops down faster and faster and faster until it gets to the point where nothing spawns. You'll have like one new spawn a day, tops. And at that point, that's basically called, I don't remember what it's called, sorry, but it's where you essentially use the system up. You've run it dry, basically. You have to move to a new system if you want. But as far as I know, there's no real timer on the actual respawn. It's more, they respawn, I believe it's after downtime they respawn. But I'm not 100% certain. I always logged in, downtime for me is at like 4 a.m., so I never logged in right after downtime. And no, they're not nearly as well controlled as Sovnil sites. I can't talk. Yes, there's 2,499 wormhole space systems. And Remrick, yes, we've used alt-corp posses before, but E-UNI cannot itself. Actually, if we did want to do that, let me say it this way. I have a C2, I have a alt that is CEO of a corp, and I have a medium posse. Talk to me about it later. But yes, it's possible. Vira, I wouldn't use the word reset. As I said, it's a curve. If it's left alone, it will gradually respawn up and back to its original state, basically. Exion, no, they couldn't. Remrick, cool, good to know. Supernova, yeah, it's just CCP said it, basically. I didn't go through and count. I remember it's on their site somewhere. Any other questions or discussion topics? Yeah, Supernova, no one counted it. CCP knows how many there are. It's all data-based. Alright, so, any other questions? Supernova, yes, you could. As far as I'm concerned, there's absolutely no reason to use a small posse in wormhole space. Use a medium or bigger. There's absolutely no reason to use a small posse, ever. Well, okay. We used one at one point, but that was because we were living there for 2 days. I believe Remrick, did it die? I don't remember. What happened to your posse that we used?
It's not dead yet. It's still there.
Oh, very nice.
Do we
have access to it, or is it lost?
No, it's lost among the 2,499.
Go figure. Yes, wormhole moons cannot be mined. Rex, that's a good question. Yeah, you're right. There are no bounties. The loot, personally, I fulfilled buy orders when I did mine. Melted nanoribbons actually went up. They're now to 6 mil, as last I checked at least, which was incredible, because I was on mine for 5. Yeah, are there NPC buy orders for them? I don't think there are. But I know you could sell it or set up sell orders. From my experience, the sell orders and the buy orders were so similar that you could just sell it and be done with it. For the blue items, okay, so for the libraries, alright. I don't remember, to be honest. It's been a couple months. But, yeah, I found that the sell orders, the lowest sell with the highest buy, were either overlapping or very close. So I just sold it. I don't know what you mean by that, Rex. Yeah, I mean, are you talking about like the best place to sell it? I mean, Jita or Ren's is really the best place, or heck, I guess any trade hub really. And I mean, worst case, you wait, 2 days and have it spawn somewhere else. R&D agents have nothing to do with Tech 3 manufacturing. You're right. I'm sorry. Rex asked if there was a region or system that specialized in wormhole loot, and no, there's not. Okay, so Supernova asked what's the main difference between wormhole space and K space. One of the biggest thing is, delayed local, like Nala said. You don't know who's there until they speak. Okay, go ahead. You don't know who's there until they speak in local. And then the other thing is that it's total nullsec. I mean, there's no security status. The other big difference, obviously, is that there's no stations, there's no stargates. So, I mean, everything that you need to go to needs to be bookmarked, basically. I can briefly cover what I know of Tech 3 manufacturing, if you guys would like. I don't know much, but I have a general idea of it. Yeah, exactly, no docking games. But what I know is that you basically need to have you need to do gas mining to get you do gas mining to get gas to do oh god, what's it called? The gas refining, whatever that's called. And you get like fluorides or reactions. Gas reactions is what it is. And then from there you take those and you either get the BPCs for the subsystems from the mag sites, and then I think you use the gas reactions to okay, that's a better link. There you go. Okay. There's more to it than I thought. Okay. So you have to make a polymer first, and that's using the fulleretes from gas mining and minerals from asteroid mining. Put them together, make the polymer, and then the polymer combined with the salvage makes parts you need for the components, and then that combined with archaeology and hacking and the data cores can be put into the component and subsystem BPCs to finally make the subsystem or whole. That's complicated. And I do teaching manufacturing, and that's complicated. Damn. Yeah, that role, exactly. That could be a class by itself. Actually, should be a class by itself. And Supernova, yes, it's expensive. It's very complicated. Not many people do it. From what I remember, the skills you need to reverse engineer something that you get, I think it's the broken hull sections that you get from the Tachyon battleship. You don't get BPCs, you get broken hull sections, and then you reverse engineer those to get the BPCs. If I remember, the reverse engineering skills, I believe, take a month of dedicated training. Like a minimum of a month. Oh yeah, that's a good picture. Yep, Tech 3 is complicated. Rumrick, I have no idea. I suppose, but I don't know. He asked if you could triple what you'd sell by doing T3 production, and I don't know. Maybe not. So hopefully I covered all the information for you guys. Let me know afterwards, what I did well, what I didn't do well. This was my first class. Thank you all for coming. If you have any more questions, I'll be here for a little while, so feel free to ask away, by all means. Supernova, you have to be more specific. As someone said, a carrier is much better for capital escalations than a dreadnought. Dreadnought will die. A carrier is a great logistics boat. Supernova, what do I fly regularly? Dude, it depends on what I'm doing. I mean, for missions, I fly Maelstrom. For PvP, I fly interceptors and assault frigates, or cruisers, or battle cruisers, or battleships. Or for wormholes, I fly battleships. So. Cyrene, if we're not at war, is a T3 feasible for wormhole fleets? Depends on the wormhole. For C5, absolutely not. For C4, I don't recommend it. For C3 or under, sure. If you want to risk losing it. Rex, Marauders, not at all. They're great mission boats, but that's about all they do. For wormhole space, you need RR fleets. You need a spider tanking fleet, basically. You can't run them so. You could maybe do a C2 solo or a C3 solo, maybe, but I don't recommend it. Supernova, yeah, you could use them in a fleet, I suppose, but it's just not. I don't recommend. There are 700 million ships minimum, plus fitting them out well. Just don't do it. Fly a normal battleship. Cyrene, I think Drac meant Tempest. Okay, I'll cover that real quick. Shield transfer versus remote rep. Yeah, I apologize. Remote rep is shield and armor. Generally, when we refer to remote rep, we mean armor remote rep. But yes, there's shield remote rep, which is generally referred to as shield transfer. Shield transfer is for shield. Remote rep is technically both. Generally, we mean armor, though. Sorry for the confusion. Yeah, Anita, I should have talked about this. My bad. I'll put it in. There are wormhole system effects. There are ones that speed up your ship. There's some that slow down your ship. There are some that increase your armor resist, decrease your armor resist, increase your shield resist, decrease your shield resists. I was in one the other day that decreased fall off, which really pissed me off. So you need to know what wormhole you have, and you can find what the effects of it are. And then, Cyrene, I don't know if Wolf Rayet is the most unpopular or not. I'd have to look up what that is. One sec, let me find one here. Wolf Rayet has increased armor resist, decreased shield resists, increased small weapon damage, and increased signature size. I don't know why that would be unpopular, since that would increase armor tanking. Rex, yes. They can live in wormhole space. They don't have to. There are also some that raid wormholes, where they just jump in, kill people, and then jump back out. Yeah, there are some. I believe ADHC, which is a ex-uni corp, does a little bit of both. I think they both live in some and raid others. Sabrina, I've actually never heard of AHARM, so I don't know. Look the corp name. I want to look at that. Supernova jump transports need sinos. So no, they have absolutely no use in a wormhole system at all. Jump freighters are terrible in wormholes. Also, freighters really should not be used in wormholes either because they're far too large, and you just don't need to bring in that much. Okay, how many people can a C3 system support for making ISK? That's a good question. I don't know for sure. It's generally as many as can run the sites on a daily basis without completely destroying the system. So, I would guess maybe 25, assuming that not everyone's on at the same time. I just honestly do not know for sure. I like their alliance name. Oh. Yeah, Rex, that is both a concern and something of note. You don't have any personal hangars. What I did was, or what you can do, is you can either anchor a GSC, a giant secure container, in a safe location, in a safe spot, anchor it and put a custom password on it. Or you can leave one in the POS and put a password on it. Either one will work, and that can be your personal hangar, so to say. But yes, there's a reason Wormhole Corps do have to watch that. Rumrick has a good point. Yes, the sites do eventually dry up in a system. So the more people that are in there, the faster they dry up, or the more people that run them, the faster they dry up. So if it has, say, 2 statics of the same class, then you can jump through to those and run those connecting systems while you're waiting for yours to respawn. So that's one thing that you can do as well. Rex statics are the wormholes that are always in your wormhole space system. So, for instance, if you will always have an A239 wormhole that will open, that will always lead to K-space, different K-space, but you'll always have an exit of that type in your wormhole. That's what a static is. A dynamic is one that leads to some other random space that generally move around throughout the constellation. Rex, I don't know if they respawn and move to other systems in the same constellation. It's an interesting thought. I don't think that's how it works. I think it's on a system-by-system basis. I don't know. You'd have to ask CCP and their coders for that one. Ixion, what about them? I've been talking about that. I don't know. I lived in them, if that's what you're wondering. I lived in a C2. If that's, I don't know what you're asking. I'm sorry. I thought I covered everything I said I was going to talk about later. Did you have a specific question that I can answer? Oh, okay. Yeah. Remrick, I believe, mentioned that that's already in the works. Since that's being done, I don't need to do anything. What Davro said outside of class later. What I was offering or thinking of possibly doing was basically, I think, what's already been being done. which might be worth setting up. Actually, should definitely be worth setting up. Was it Remrick that mentioned that? Is he still here?
Yeah, you and I should chat about that later.
Yep, definitely. I have everything for a boss but the tower, if you want to possibly make use of that. Yeah, we'll chat later. Okay, so any last questions or anything else? Arceus, wasn't planning on doing a practical, so I don't have anything. If a scout finds a C5 or something, hell, I'll take out a fleet, but I don't have anything planned. Thanks for coming, guys. I actually liked it. It was much class. I was a little bit nervous.